A grieving widow wanders the winter ball until the coldest duke in England shakes her soul with a look. Hello readers, welcome to this channel. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into this story. The winter ball glowed like a jewel box against the frozen London night. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across silk gowns and polished floors. Music swirled through rooms packed with lords and ladies, all laughing and dancing as if winter itself could not touch them. Lady Rowan Aldridge drifted through it all like a ghost. Her black morning dress marked her as different. While others wore sapphire and emerald, she remained in widow's weeds, though 6 months had passed since Owen's death. The grief still sat heavy in her chest, but tonight it mixed with something sharper. Fear. She moved along the edge of the ballroom, staying close to the walls. Her fingers kept touching the locket at her throat, Owen's final gift. Inside was a tiny portrait of him, smiling the way he used to before the money troubles began, before the sleepless nights and desperate letters, before he collapsed in his study with his heart simply giving out. Rowan scanned the crowd, searching for exits, the grand doors to the terrace, the servants' entrance near the musicians. She always needed to know where she could run. Still playing the tragic widow, I see. A voice whispered as Lady Catherine swept past. Her friend, former friend, didn't even slow down. Rowan's cheeks burned, but she kept moving. She knew what they all said, that Owen had left debts, that she had nothing left but a small cottage in the country, that she only came to these balls hoping to catch another husband before she lost even that. None of it was entirely wrong, which made it hurt more. She reached for a glass of champagne from a passing servant's tray. Her hand was shaking. She needed to calm down, to breathe, Her elbow struck something solid. The crash seemed impossibly loud. Crystal shattered on marble. Champagne splashed across expensive shoes. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Rowan looked up, horror flooding through her, and met the coldest eyes she had ever seen. The man before her was tall, dressed entirely in black except for a white cravat at his throat. His face could have been carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, a stern mouth, dark hair swept back from a high forehead. But his eyes, gray as winter frost, they seemed to pierce straight through her, seeing every secret, every fear, every desperate hope she tried to hide. "Forgive me," Rowan whispered. Her voice came out thin and broken. "I didn't see, Lady Aldridge." His voice was deep and precise, each word perfectly formed. Not warm, but not cruel either. Simply present, aware. The room seemed to hold its breath. Someone nearby gasped. Another whispered a name that sent ice through Rowan's veins. The Duke of Windthirst. Gideon Hale, the coldest duke in England. A man who had not danced in 3 years. Who sat in Parliament and judged others with that same piercing gaze. Who was said to have a heart of stone where other men had flesh and feeling. And she had just dumped champagne on his shoes. "Your Grace." Rowan sank into a curtsy, her legs trembling. "Please, I am so sorry. I can pay for the cleaning. Can you?" His head tilted slightly. Those gray eyes studied her face. "I was under the impression Lady Aldridge's finances were constrained." The words should have been cruel. Said by anyone else, they would have destroyed her. But something in his tone made them sound almost like curiosity, as if he simply stated facts without judgment. "I'll manage," Rowan said quietly, lifting her chin. Pride was all she had left. "I will find a way." For a long moment, he said nothing. The crowd watched, waiting for him to humiliate her, to turn away, to do something that would become tomorrow's scandal. Instead, the Duke of Windthirst extended one gloved hand. "Dance with me." The room erupted in whispers. Rowan stared at his hand as if it might bite her. "Your Grace, I couldn't possibly. You have already ruined my shoes, Lady Aldridge. You may as well ruin my reputation as well." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something almost like it. "Unless you wish to flee to the terrace instead." Rowan's eyes widened. How did he know she had been planning exactly that? But the music was starting again. A waltz. The crowd was watching, and his hand remained extended, steady and certain. She placed her gloved fingers in his palm. His grip was firm, but not crushing. He led her onto the floor with the confidence of a man who had never doubted himself. Other couples moved aside, creating space, and Rowan found herself in the center of the ballroom with the most feared man in London society. "I don't understand," she murmured as they began to move. He danced with surprising grace for someone so severe. His steps were precise, measured, perfectly in time with the music. "What troubles you, Lady Alderidge? Why you would dance with me? Why you would risk association?" "I'm not concerned with association." His gray eyes held hers. "Tell me, how long has Lord Sedgwick been pressing you for payment?" Rowan nearly stumbled. The Duke's hand at her waist steadied her immediately. "How did you? I'm making my business to know." He guided her through a turn, his movements so controlled she barely had to think about the steps. "Your late husband borrowed extensively from Sedgwick in the months before his death. The interest has been accumulating." Shame burned through her. Owen was desperate. He thought one more investment would save us. Instead, it destroyed him. The words were blunt, but Rowan found she preferred them to false sympathy. "Yes." They danced in silence for several measures. Rowan became aware of how the Duke noticed everything. The way her eyes kept darting to the doors. How her fingers trembled slightly against his shoulder. The tight set of her jaw as she fought back tears. "You wear your grief like armor," he said quietly, "and scan every room for escape routes. When you have lost everything, your grace, you learn to prepare for the worst. Have you lost everything?" His gaze intensified. "Or are you still fighting?" The question struck something deep inside her. Rowan looked up at this cold, stern man and realized he understood. Somehow, he saw past the tragic widow everyone else pitted or scorned. He saw the woman underneath, the one who got up every morning and faced another day, despite the crushing weight of debt and grief and fear. "I'm still fighting," she whispered. The set ended. The Duke released her and stepped back, executing a perfect bow. Rowan curtsied, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the dance. "Thank you, Your Grace. The terrace door is to your left," he said softly, so only she could hear. "Should you need air?" Then he was gone, moving through the crowd like a ship through water. Everyone made way for him. Within moments, he had disappeared into another room, leaving Rowan standing alone in the center of the ballroom with every eye upon her. The whispers started immediately. Shocked, delighted, vicious, Rowan moved toward the terrace on unsteady legs. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it. She pressed her hands against the stone railing, trying to slow her breathing, trying to understand what had just happened. A footman appeared at her elbow. "Lady Alderidge, this was delivered for you." He handed her a folded note sealed with red wax. Rowan broke the seal with trembling fingers and read by the light spilling from the ballroom windows. "Payment is due in full by week's end. Do not test my patience further. You know what I can take from you. Sedgwick." The letter shook in her hands. Her cottage. He meant her cottage, the only thing she had left in the world. Bad news. Rowan spun around. The Duke of Windsor stood in the shadows near the terrace door. How long had he been watching? "It's nothing, Your Grace. A personal matter." Sedgwick wastes no time. He moved closer, his face half in shadow, half in light. "I saw his messenger arrive." "You see everything," Rowan said, and it came out almost like an accusation. "It is a useful skill." His gray eyes caught the light. "One that tells me you are in more danger than you admit. I can handle Lord Sedgwick." "Can you?" He pulled a paper from inside his coat. "Then you should know that as trustee for an estate audit, I have oversight of certain Alderidge accounts, including debts owed to creditors who may have engaged in questionable lending practices." Rowan's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying, Lady Alderidge, that you are not as alone as you believe." He tucked the paper away. "And that tomorrow morning, you should call my residence. We have much to discuss." Before she could respond, he bowed once more and left. Rowan stood alone on the terrace, the winter wind biting through her thin dress. Sedgwick's threat crumpled in one hand, an impossible hope blooming somewhere in her chest. The coldest Duke in England had looked at her, truly looked, and seen something worth saving. She touched her locket. "Oh, Owen," she whispered to the night. "What have you gotten me into?" But for the first time in 6 months, Rowan Alderidge felt something other than grief. She felt alive. Morning came too quickly. Rowan sat in the hired carriage, watching frost patterns melt on the windows as they rolled through London's fashionable streets. Her best day dress, gray wool, mended at the cuffs, felt shabby even before she reached Windthirst's house. The building loomed before her, all white stone and tall windows. Elegant but austere like its owner. A footman in perfect livery helped her down, his face carefully blank. If he judged her worn gloves or a simple bonnet, he gave no sign. "Lady Alderidge to see his grace," she said, hating how uncertain she sounded. "His grace is expecting you, my lady." This way. The entrance hall made Rowan feel even smaller. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, portraits of stern ancestors staring down from the walls. Everything was clean and ordered and cold. The footman led her to a study on the ground floor. He knocked twice, received a brief "enter," and opened the door. The Duke of Windthirst stood behind a massive desk covered in neat stacks of papers. Everything in the room had its place. Books perfectly aligned on shelves, pens arranged by size, not a speck of dust anywhere. It was a room that demanded control. "Lady Alderidge." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming." Rowan sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. In daylight, the Duke looked even more severe. No softness in his face, no warmth in those gray eyes. And yet, she remembered how gently he had steadied her during the waltz. How he had noticed her fear without mocking it. "You said we needed to discuss the Alderidge accounts," she began. "Among other things." He sat as well, his posture perfectly straight. "But first, the facts. Lord Sedgwick holds notes totaling £8,000 in your late husband's name." Rowan's stomach twisted. "That much? The interest compounds monthly. You have paid what you can, but it barely covers the interest. At this rate, you will never be free of the debt." "I know." The words came out bitter. "Sedgwick has made that abundantly clear." The Duke opened a leather folder. "What you may not know is that several of these notes appear to be fraudulent." Rowan sat forward. "Fraudulent? The terms changed after your husband signed. Interest rates increased. Dates were altered." His finger traced a line on one document. "I believe Sedgwick has been systematically trapping borrowers into debts they can never repay." "But why would he?" Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. "So he can seize their property." "Precisely. Your cottage in particular sits on land Sedgwick wishes to develop. If you default on the debt, he can take it through the courts." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "That cottage is all I have left. Owen grew up there. It's the only place where I still feel safe," the Duke finished quietly. "I know." She looked at him sharply. "How could you possibly know?" "Because I know what it means to lose the only place that feels like home." Something flickered across his face, there and gone too quickly to identify. "Which is why I'm offering you a solution." "What kind of solution?" The Duke leaned back slightly. "Sedgwick is a predator who relies on his victims being isolated and desperate. He targets widows, minor gentry, anyone without powerful protection. But he is also a coward. He will not move against someone under my consideration." Rowan's breath caught. "Your consideration? I propose a temporary arrangement. We will be seen together publicly. Society will believe I am courting you. Sedgwick will not dare proceed with his schemes while you have my protection. Meanwhile, I will work through the legal channels to expose the fraudulent notes." "You want us to pretend?" The word felt dangerous in her mouth. "Yes, for perhaps 2 or 3 months. Long enough to untangle the legal mess and secure your cottage in your name alone." It sounded simple. Too simple. Rowan searched his face for signs of ulterior motives. "What do you want in return?" "Access to your husband's papers. Letters, account books, anything that might connect to Sedgwick's other schemes." The Duke's gaze remained steady. "I'm not offering this arrangement out of charity, Lady Alderidge. I need evidence to bring before Parliament. Your husband's documents may provide it. So I'm useful to you." "Yes. No hositastion. No false reassurance. Just the cold truth." Rowan found herself almost liking him for it. At least he was honest. "And after, when you have what you need and Sedgwick is dealt with, we part ways. You keep your cottage, your freedom, and your reputation intact. I return to my work." He folded his hands on the desk. "No obligations beyond what we agree to now." Pride warred with survival. Rowan knew she should be offended by the clinical nature of his offer. But she was also drowning, and this cold, stern man was throwing her a rope. "I have conditions," she said. One dark eyebrow rose slightly. "Name them." No lies in private. When we are alone, we speak truthfully or not at all. My grief is my own. I will not pretend to be someone I'm not. Agreed. His response came instantly. I have my own condition. You will not make yourself small for society's comfort. If we are to do this, we do it properly. You will attend events at my side, hold your head high, and let others see you as I do. And how is that? As a woman who refuses to break. His gray eyes held hers, even when the world insists she should. The words hit harder than any compliment. Rowan felt her throat tighten with emotion she thought she had cried out months ago. When do we begin? She asked softly. This afternoon. There is a promenade in Hyde Park at 3 o'clock. Half of London will be there. The Duke rose, extending his hand across the desk. Do we have an agreement? Rowan stood and placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, businesslike, and somehow reassuring. Yes, Your Grace. We have an agreement. Then I shall collect you at 2:30. He released her hand, but didn't move away. One more thing, Lady Aldridge. When we are in public, you may call me Windthirst. When we are alone, you will use Gideon. The intimacy of his given name felt dangerous. That seems necessary. We must become comfortable with each other if this arrangement is to be believable. His expression didn't change, but his voice softened slightly. I will not have you stumbling over formalities and raising suspicion. Very well, Gideon. The name felt strange on her tongue. Then you should call me Rowan. Rowan. He said it once as if testing it, then nodded. I will see you this afternoon. The carriage ride home passed in a blur. Rowan's mind spun with everything that had just happened. A bargain with the coldest duke in England. A pretend courtship. A chance to save her cottage and expose Sedgwick's crimes. And beneath it all, the memory of how Gideon Hale's gray eyes had looked at her with something that might have been respect. True to his word, the Duke's carriage arrived at 2:30. Rowan wore her better walking dress, deep blue wool that brought out her eyes. She had even pinned up her hair with more care than usual. If they were going to be seen together, she would not embarrass him. Gideon helped her into the carriage himself, his touch proper but firm. He wore a dark coat and carried a walking stick, looking every inch the aristocrat. But Rowan noticed small details now. The way his jaw was set tight. How his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. He was as uncomfortable with this as she was, just better at hiding it. The park will be crowded, he said as they rolled forward. Society is eager for fresh gossip after last night's ball. You mean they're eager to see if the tragic widow has trapped the cold duke? Let them talk. Their opinions matter less than you think. Easy to say when you have money and a title. Gideon looked at her sharply. I did not say their opinions don't hurt. I said they matter less than you think. There is a difference. Rowan fell silent, chastened. He was right. She had been so focused on what others thought that she had forgotten to consider what she thought of herself. Hyde Park glittered with frost and winter sunlight. Carriages lined the paths, disgorging lords and ladies in their finest. Rowan's stomach churned as Gideon helped her down. All eyes turned toward them immediately. Steady, he murmured, offering his arm. Breathe. She placed her hand on his arm and felt solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. He adjusted his stride to match hers, slowing his naturally long steps. It was a small kindness, but it steadied her. They walked the main path, nodding to acquaintances. Whispers followed like birds taking flight. The Duke of Windthirst with Lady Aldridge. After that display last night, she must have entrapped him somehow. Lord Sedgwick stood near a fountain with several other gentlemen. His face went red when he saw them. Rowan felt Gideon's arm tense beneath her fingers. Easy, she whispered, echoing his earlier advice. To her surprise, his tension eased slightly. They passed Sedgwick without acknowledging him, and Rowan felt a savage satisfaction at the fury in his eyes. You enjoyed that, Gideon observed once they were past. Is that wrong? No, it's human. The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. I enjoyed it as well. They reached a quieter section of path lined with bare trees. The crowd thinned here, giving them space to talk without being overheard. Tell me about your husband, Gideon said. Not the debts or the scandal. Who is Owen Aldridge? The question caught her off guard. No one asked about Owen anymore. He had become only his mistakes. He was kind, Rowan said slowly. Maybe too kind. He wanted to help everyone, fix every problem. When his brother needed money, Owen gave it even though we couldn't afford it. When a friend's investment failed, Owen tried to make it right. He took on too much. Yes, and when his own investments began to fail, he was too proud to tell me. Too ashamed. Rowan's throat tightened. By the time I learned how bad it was, Sedgwick had already sunk his claws in. Did Owen know the notes were fraudulent? I don't think so. He trusted people. He believed Sedgwick was helping him. She touched her locket. It killed him. Not the debt itself, but the shame of it. His heart just stopped. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than she expected. Shame is a kind of poison. It destroys slowly from within. You sound like you know. Edo. He adjusted their path around a frozen puddle, his hand briefly touching her elbow to steady her. My father made poor investments as well. Before he died, he extracted a promise from me that I would never let emotion cloud my judgment, that I would be cold and rational always. So you became the coldest duke in England. I became what was necessary. His gray eyes met hers, or so I told myself. They had circled back toward the crowded section. Rowan saw Lady Catherine watching them with wide eyes. Lord Pemberton whispered to his companion. Even Sedgwick stared, his face twisted with barely concealed rage. They're all looking, Rowan murmured. Good. Let them see that you are not alone. Gideon's voice carried quiet conviction. Let them see that you have survived. When they reached his carriage, he helped her up with the same careful attention he had shown throughout the walk. As they pulled away, Rowan glimpsed Sedgwick's expression one more time. The predator had just realized his prey had found protection. Back at her lodgings, Gideon walked her to the door. Tomorrow there is a charity event at Lady Pemberton's. I will collect you at 2 o'clock. Will Sedgwick be there? Undoubtedly, which is precisely why we must attend. He paused, his hand on the carriage door. You did well today, Rowan. You held your ground. I had help, she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone, like sunlight through clouds. As do I. That night, Rowan went through Owen's papers as she had promised. Most were what she expected: bills, letters, account books. But at the bottom of a locked drawer, she found something that made her blood run cold. A sealed letter addressed to Gideon Hale, Duke of Windthirst. Her hands shook as she turned it over. Why would Owen write to Gideon? They had never been friends. She knew of no connection between them. She broke the seal. Your Grace, if you're reading this, then I am dead and Rowan is alone. I am writing to beg what I have no right to ask. Please protect her. Sedgwick is not what he seems. His lending practices are part of a larger scheme. I was a fool to trust him, and now I fear for my wife's safety. She knows nothing of the depths of my debts or Sedgwick's true nature. Please, I beg you as one who knew your father, keep her from harm. Owen Aldridge. Rowan read the letter 3 times. Owen had known Gideon's father. He had feared Sedgwick enough to write this. And somehow, Gideon had known to approach her at the ball. This was not coincidence. This was not simply a business arrangement. Gideon had made a promise to a dying man. A week passed in a blur of public appearances. The charity event at Lady Pemberton's, where Gideon stood at Rowan's side as she endured pitying looks and sharp whispers. A musicale where his presence in the seat beside her made everyone reconsider their judgments. A ride through Serpentine, where they spoke of everything except the bargain between them. Society didn't know what to make of it. The coldest duke in England, courting the grieving widow. Theories flew like startled birds. He pitied her. She had entrapped him. It was business. It was scandal. But slowly, something began to shift. Invitations that had stopped coming started arriving again. Ladies who had turned their backs now nodded politely. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was less like drowning. And through it all, Rowan found herself watching Gideon. The way he listened when she spoke, truly listened, his gray eyes focused entirely on her. How he shortened his stride without her asking. The small kindnesses, returning a dropped glove, shielding her from a cold wind, steering conversation away from painful topics. He was not cold. He was careful. There was a difference. On the 8th day, Gideon suggested they visit Kew Gardens. The winter glasshouse will be warm, he said, and relatively private. They took his carriage, and for once Rowan didn't feel the need to fill the silence with nervous chatter. She simply watched London roll past, aware of him sitting across from her, reading through papers with the same intense focus he brought to everything. "You found something," she said. He looked up surprised. "How did you know?" "Your jaw is tighter. You only do that when you're angry." Gideon set the papers aside. "I didn't realize I was so transparent." "You're not. Not to most people." Rowan paused. "But I've been watching. As have I." His gaze held hers. "You laugh less than you did. Even at the musicale, when Lady Catherine told that absurd story about her cat. It wasn't that funny. It was ridiculous. 2 months ago, you would have laughed anyway to be polite. Now you don't bother hiding your true reactions." He tilted his head slightly. "I consider that progress." The carriage stopped at Kew. They walked through frost-covered paths until they reached the Palm House, a massive structure of glass and iron. Inside, tropical warmth hit like a wave. Moisture clung to every surface. Green plants spilled from pots and climbed walls, creating a jungle in the heart of winter. For the first time in months, Rowan felt warm all the way through. They walked between ferns and palms, their footsteps echoing softly. Gideon removed his gloves and tucked them in his pocket. Rowan did the same, her fingers finally able to move freely. "This place is beautiful," she said. "My mother loved it here." Gideon touched a broadleaf. "She would bring me as a child." She said it proved that growth was possible even in the coldest season. Was she right? I don't know. He looked at Rowan. Perhaps she was. They found a bench near a citrus tree heavy with fruit. Rowan sat, breathing in the scent of earth and growing things. For a moment, she could almost forget the bargain, the pretending, the constant weight of society's judgment. "I found something," she said quietly. "In Owen's papers." Gideon's expression sharpened. "What?" She drew the letter from her reticule and handed it to him. "This, addressed to you." He read in silence, his face growing harder with each line. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "I should have told you," he said. "Yes, you should have." Rowan's voice shook slightly. "Did you know my husband?" "Not well, but I knew his father, and I knew Owen was a good man caught in bad circumstances." Gideon's jaw worked. "When he died, I received word that there was a letter. I collected it from a solicitor the day before the winter ball. So when you saw me there, I knew exactly who you were and what Sedgwick was doing to you." He met her eyes. "I had already decided to intervene. The champagne incident simply provided an opportunity." Rowan should have been angry. She should have felt manipulated, used. But instead, she felt something else entirely. "You kept your promise to him," she said softly. "I keep all my promises." Gideon's voice was quiet. "Even the ones that complicate my life." "Am I a complication?" "The most confounding one I've encountered." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I was content with my cold, ordered existence. Then you stumbled into me at a ball, and everything became infinitely more complex. I could apologize again for the champagne." "Don't. It was the best accident of my life." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was ready to name. Rowan looked away first, her heart beating too fast. "Tell me about your father," she said, needing to shift the conversation to safer ground. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. He was brilliant and reckless in equal measure. He made investments based on instinct rather than research. For years, it worked, then it didn't. Like Owen. Yes, but my father had a title to protect him. When his schemes failed, his friends quietly covered the debts. No scandal, no consequences. Gideon's voice hardened. "Except for my mother. The stress destroyed her health. She died when I was 19. I am sorry. My father made me promise, before he died, that I would never let emotion rule my decisions. That I would be cold and rational, always protecting the family name." He looked at the citrus tree. "I became exactly what he wanted. The coldest duke in England. Until now," Rowan said softly. "Until now." He turned to her. "You make me question that promise. You make me wonder if perhaps my father was wrong." Their eyes met. In the humid warmth of the glass house, with tropical plants surrounding them and fog on the glass hiding them from the world, something fundamental shifted. Rowan reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. Her fingers touched his hand where it rested on the bench between them. His skin was warm, his knuckles rough. "Human. You're not cold," she whispered. "You're just careful. There's a difference." Gideon looked at their hands. For a heartbeat, His fingers moved as if to take hers. Then he pulled back, standing abruptly. We should return. People will talk if we're gone too long. The moment shattered like glass. Rowan stood as well, feeling foolish and exposed. Of course. They walked back to the carriage in silence. But Rowan noticed how Gideon's hands remained clenched into fists at his sides. How his jaw stayed tight. How he helped her into the carriage without meeting her eyes. He felt it too. Whatever was growing between them, real beneath the pretense. That evening, an envelope arrived at Rowan's lodgings. Inside was a note written in an elegant hand. The final masquerade of the season will be held Saturday next. All of society will attend. I suggest we make an appearance together. We must remind Sedgwick that you remain under my protection. Gee. Beneath the formal words, he had added one line in smaller script. I should not have pulled away. Forgive me. Rowan pressed the note to her chest, her heart aching with something she wasn't ready to name. The next morning, everything changed. A messenger arrived at Gideon's townhouse with urgent news. Rowan was there reviewing papers with his solicitor when she heard the commotion. Your Grace must come immediately, the messenger gasped. There's been a discovery at the courts. Gideon emerged from his study, his face grave. What discovery? Documents, Your Grace. Forged promissory notes. Dozens of them. The messenger gulped air. They connect Lord Sedgwick's schemes to others in Parliament. But he hesitated. But what? Gideon's voice was dangerously quiet. One note bears your late father's signature, Your Grace. They're saying the Duke of Windthirst was part of Sedgwick's conspiracy. The room went silent. Rowan saw the blood drain from Gideon's face. Saw his hands clench into fists. That's impossible, he said. My father died 5 years ago. The note is dated 4 years ago, Your Grace. After your father's death. The messenger looked miserable. Someone forged his signature. Understanding crashed over Rowan like a wave. If the forgery became public, it would destroy the Windthirst name. Everything Gideon had worked for, everything he had sacrificed to protect his family's reputation, would be undone. Sedgwick, she breathed. He's striking back. Gideon's gray eyes met hers. In them, she saw rage and fear and something that looked like despair. The masquerade, he said quietly. It's in 3 days. If this becomes public before then we face it together, Rowan interrupted. Whatever happens, we face it together. For the first time since they met, the coldest duke in England looked uncertain. This could destroy you as well, he said. Then we'll both be ruined. Rowan lifted her chin. I've been ruined before. I survived. Something blazed in his eyes, gratitude, respect, and something fiercer. Rowan, no. She stepped closer. You protected me when no one else would. You kept a promise to a man you barely knew because it was right. Now it's my turn. Gideon stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her shock, he took her hand and raised it to his lips. The kiss was brief, formal, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Thank you, he said quietly. The messenger cleared his throat uncomfortably. Your Grace? What shall I tell the courts? Gideon straightened, his face settling back into its usual stern mask. But his hand stayed wrapped around Rowan's. Tell them the Duke of Windthirst will address these accusations publicly. At the masquerade, his voice was iron. And tell them I will bring evidence of the true conspiracy. The messenger bowed and left. Gideon turned to Rowan, still holding her hand. I need to examine those documents. If I can prove the forgery, then we can expose Sedgwick completely. Rowan's mind raced. Owen's letter mentioned a larger scheme. What there are more victims, more forged notes. There are. Gideon's jaw tightened. I've been tracking them for months. But I lacked the final piece, proof that Sedgwick himself orchestrated it all. Then we find it. Rowan squeezed his hand. We have 3 days. They worked through the night. Gideon's study became a war room. Papers spread across every surface. His solicitor brought files. His secretary compiled lists of names. And Rowan, with her careful eye for detail, found patterns no one else had seen. Look, she said as dawnlight crept through the windows. These signatures. They're too perfect. Gideon leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell sandalwood and leather. What do you mean? Real signatures vary slightly each time. But these, she pointed to 3 different documents. They're identical, exactly identical. as if someone traced them. His breath caught. You're right. More than that. Rowan pulled out another paper. This note, supposedly signed by your father? The ink is wrong. Look at how it's aged compared to the date written. Gideon examined it closely. 4-year-old ink wouldn't look this fresh. This was written recently. Within the last few months, I guess. Rowan sat back, exhausted but triumphant. We can prove it's a forgery. We can prove this one is. Gideon's expression was grim. But Sedgwick will have others, and he'll present them at the masquerade to destroy me publicly. Then we strike first. Rowan stood, surprising herself with her own boldness. I'll speak. I'll tell society the truth about Owen's debts, about Sedgwick's predation. If I go public with my accusations, he'll destroy you. He's already trying to destroy me. She met Gideon's eyes. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not with you standing beside me. Something raw crossed his face. He reached out and cupped her cheek with one hand. The gesture was so tender, so unlike the cold Duke the world saw, that Rowan's breath caught. You terrify me, he said softly. The way you face the world. The strength in you. I thought I was protecting you. But perhaps you've been protecting yourself all along. We protect each other, Rowan whispered. That's what this has become, hasn't it? His thumb traced her cheekbone. Yes, though I'm not certain when pretending became something else entirely. Gideon, he stepped back, his hand falling away. Forgive me. I am tired. I'm not thinking clearly. But Rowan saw the truth in his eyes. He was thinking clearly for the first time in years. The promise to his father, the vow to never let emotion rule him, it was cracking. Because of her. We should rest, she said quietly. We need to be sharp for the masquerade. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The night of the masquerade arrived with fresh snow. London glittered white and clean, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Rowan dressed in her finest gown, deep midnight blue silk that Owen had bought her years ago. She had not worn it since his death, afraid of the memories. But tonight felt like reclaiming something. Not her old life, but a new one built from its ashes. She wore a simple silver mask that left her face mostly visible. She would not hide tonight. Gideon's carriage arrived at 7. When he handed her inside, Rowan's heart stuttered. He wore black as always, but his mask was severe, a raven's face in dark feathers and silver. You look, he stopped, searching for words. Unbowed. So do you. She settled her skirts. Are you ready? As ready as I can be for social warfare. His mouth quirked beneath the mask. Though I suspect you'll prove the better warrior tonight. The ballroom blazed with light. Chandeliers dripped crystal. Masked figures swirled across the floor in gowns of every color. But Rowan felt the weight of watching eyes the moment they entered. The Duke of Windthirst, whose family name had been dragged through scandal. Lady Alderidge, the grieving widow. Together. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Gideon offered his arm. Steady, he murmured. They moved into the ballroom, heads high. Rowan felt his strength beside her, solid and certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Lord Sedgwick stood near the far wall, surrounded by cronies. His mask was gold and ornate, but his eyes, visible through the cutouts, burned with malice. As Rowan watched, he moved toward the orchestra, toward the small platform where the hostess would make announcements. He's going to do it now, she breathed. Let him. Gideon's voice was steel. We're ready. Sedgwick mounted the platform. The orchestra fell silent. Conversations died. My lords and ladies, Sedgwick's voice rang out, unctuous and smug. I apologize for this interruption, but I feel duty compels me to share certain discoveries. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. It has come to my attention that the late Duke of Windthirst, father to our current Duke, was involved in certain financial irregularities. Sedgwick pulled papers from his coat. I have promissory notes bearing his signature, connecting him to fraudulent schemes that destroyed innocent families. Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned to Gideon, waiting for his reaction. He stood perfectly still, his face unreadable behind the raven mask. Sedgwick continued, gaining confidence. These documents prove that the Windthirst family are being slandered by a forger and a thief. Rowan's voice rang out clear and strong. She stepped forward before Gideon could stop her, moving toward the platform with her head high. Lady Alderidge. Sedgwick's smile was poisonous. How kind of you to defend your benefactor. I defend the truth, Lord Sedgwick. Something you would not recognize if it danced before you in a ball gown. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sedgwick's face reddened. The truth is that you are a desperate widow who has entrapped. The truth, Rowan interrupted, her voice rising, is that you are a predator. You trapped my husband in fraudulent loans. You altered the terms after he signed. And when he discovered what you had done, she faltered. This was the part she had no proof for. The terrible suspicion that had haunted her for months. Gideon appeared at her side. You murdered him. The ballroom erupted. Shouts. Gasps. The orchestra scattered. Sedgwick laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's absurd. Owen Aldridge's heart failed. Everyone knows. Everyone knows what you wanted them to know. Gideon's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. But I have testimony from a boatman who witnessed two men forcing another into the Thames that night. Men in your employ, Lord Sedgwick.
Lies. Sedgwick was shouting now. You have no proof. I have your ledgers. Gideon produced a thick folder. Seized this afternoon by order of the magistrate. They show payments to known criminals. Forged documents. A systematic scheme to trap borrowers and seize their property. The courts will never. The courts already have. A new voice spoke from the ballroom entrance. Everyone turned. A tall man in judicial robes stood in the doorway, flanked by constables. Lord Harrington, the Lord Chancellor himself. Lord Sedgwick, Harrington intoned. You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to murder. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Sedgwick tried to run, but the constables were faster. They seized him roughly, and papers scattered from his coat across the polished floor. Rowan watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. Justice, after so many months of helplessness. Vindication, after so much shame. Sedgwick was dragged away, still shouting denials. The crowd pressed close, everyone talking at once. But Rowan barely heard them. She turned and found Gideon watching her. Behind his raven mask, his gray eyes blazed with something that made her heart race. The conservatory, he said quietly. Please. She followed him through the crowd, through doors that led to a glass-enclosed space filled with winter flowers. Snow drifted past the windows outside. Inside, warmth and silence. Gideon removed his mask. His face was stern as always, but his eyes held everything he had never said. You were magnificent, he said. I was terrified. So was I. He stepped closer. When you stood up to him, when you risked everything. I risked nothing that mattered. My reputation was already ruined. My cottage was already threatened. Rowan removed her own mask, meeting his gaze directly. But you risked the family, name you've spent your whole life protecting. I risked it for you. The words were simple, final. Because somewhere in these past weeks, you became more important than any name or reputation. Rowan's throat tightened. The arrangement was temporary. We agreed. I know what we agreed. Gideon reached for her hand, his touch gentle. But I find I cannot keep that particular promise. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent 5 years being the coldest duke in England. I kept my father's promises. I protected the family name. I let no emotion rule me. His fingers tightened on hers. And then you stumbled into me at a ball, spilling champagne and looking at me as if I might actually be human beneath the ice. Gideon. You were right, Rowan. I'm not cold. I'm careful. I built walls to protect myself from becoming my father. But you, his voice roughened. You climbed right over them without even trying. Tears stung Rowan's eyes. I'm still grieving. I still love Owen's memory. I know. I would never ask you to stop. He cupped her face with both hands now, his touch achingly tender. But perhaps there is room in your heart for both. For honoring what was, while building what might be. What might be, she echoed. Marry me. Not as part of an arrangement. Not to save your cottage or protect you from Sedgwick. His gray eyes held hers. Marry me because I have fallen impossibly, completely in love with you. Because I want to spend my life climbing over your walls the way you climbed over mine. Rowan laughed through her tears. I don't have walls. I'm a disaster. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Gideon's thumbs traced her cheekbones, catching tears. You faced ruin and kept going. You stood beside me tonight when it would have been safer to walk away. You made me remember what it feels like to be alive. She should say no. It was too soon, too fast, too complicated. But as she looked into his eyes, Rowan saw her own truth reflected back. She had been drowning in grief and debt and shame. And then the coldest duke in England had looked at her, truly looked, and seen someone worth saving. But more than that, he had let her save him too. Yes, she whispered. I'll marry you. His smile transformed his face, warming those stern features until she could barely remember why anyone had called him cold. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. When they parted, Rowan touched her locket. Owen's last gift. He would have liked you, she said softly. I hope so. He trusted me to protect you. Gideon's expression turned serious. I intend to spend my life honoring that trust. By keeping me safe, by loving you. His arms came around her, solid and warm. By letting you keep climbing my walls whenever I forget how to be human. By building a life where neither of us has to pretend anymore. Through the conservatory windows, snow fell softly on London. Inside, surrounded by winter flowers, two people who had each stood alone against the world found shelter in each other. Spring came early that year. By April, the scandal had settled into society's memory like sediment in wine. Lord Sedgwick faced trial for fraud and murder. His co-conspirators scattered like rats. The forged promissory notes were exposed, the victims compensated. Owen Aldridge's name was formally cleared, recorded in the courts as an innocent man destroyed by predators. Rowan's cottage was secured in her name alone, free and clear. She kept it but rarely stayed there now. It held too many ghosts. Instead, she found herself at Windthirst House more often than not. Lady Agatha had moved in permanently after the masquerade, declaring she was too old to live alone and too curious to miss whatever happens next. What happened next was something neither Rowan nor Gideon had expected. They didn't rush into marriage. Instead, they courted properly this time, with no pretense, no arrangement, no bargain. Just two people learning each other. Gideon took her to bookshops and let her choose volumes for his library. Rowan taught him how to laugh again, really laugh, until tears streamed down his face. They argued about politics and poetry. They walked in Hyde Park without caring who watched. They sat in comfortable silence, reading by the fire while Lady Agatha snored gently in her chair. And slowly, carefully, Rowan's grief transformed. It didn't disappear. She didn't want it to. Owen would always be part of her story. But the sharp pain dulled to an ache, and then to a gentle melancholy. She could remember him now with more smiles than tears. You're healing, Gideon observed one evening. They sat in his study, Rowan at his desk reviewing estate accounts while he worked on a parliamentary report. I suppose I am. She set down her pen. Does that bother you? Why would it? Because you fell in love with a grieving widow. What if I'm different now? Gideon crossed to her, turning her chair so she faced him. I fell in love with Rowan Aldridge. Grieving, healing, laughing, crying. You're still you. The coldest duke in England is remarkably wise. The coldest duke in England melted months ago. He pulled her to her feet. And everyone knows it. Is that bad? It's terrifying. His arms came around her waist. I spent years being untouchable. Now I find myself devastated if you're sad, elated when you smile, completely undone by the way you look at me over breakfast. Rowan laughed. Devastated? Undone? This from the man who once barely blinked. You've ruined me. But he was smiling, and I've never been happier. They married in June, 1 year exactly from the night Owen died. Not at a grand cathedral, but in the small church near Rowan's cottage. Lady Agatha wept. Lord Harrington stood as Gideon's witness. And Rowan carried a small bouquet tied with a ribbon from Owen's locket, a way of bringing him with her as she stepped into her future. The wedding breakfast was intimate. 50 guests instead of 500. Laughter instead of formality. When Gideon pulled Rowan into the first dance, she remembered another winter ball, another first dance. How terrified she had been. How alone. What are you thinking? Gideon asked, guiding her through the steps. That I'm grateful for that spilled champagne. As am I. His gray eyes warmed. Though my shoes never recovered, I'll buy you new ones. With what money? I know you spent your pin money on books last week. Our pin money, she corrected. That was the arrangement. Ah, yes. The arrangement. He pulled her infinitesimally closer. I believe we've rather exceeded its terms. Considerably. Rowan rested her head against his shoulder, breaking every rule of proper dancing. Do you regret it? Not for a single moment. The music swelled. Other couples joined them on the floor. But Rowan barely noticed. She was too busy remembering how to be happy. That night, standing on the terrace of Windthirst House with her new husband beside her, Rowan looked up at the stars. Thank you, she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Owen, to fate, or to the universe itself. Gideon's hand found hers in the darkness. For what? For seeing me, really seeing me, when everyone else looked away. I could do nothing else. He raised her hand to his lips. You shook my soul with a look, Rowan Aldridge. From that first moment in the ballroom, I was yours. She turned to face him fully. The tragic widow and the coldest duke in England. Two people who found each other in the wreckage. His expression grew tender, and built something new from what remained. Inside, music and laughter continued. Lady Agatha's voice rose above the rest, telling some outrageous story. Tomorrow they would leave for the Lake District, just the two of them, for a proper honeymoon. But tonight, they stood together watching stars appear one by one in the summer sky. A year ago, Rowan had wandered a winter ball drowning in grief and debt. She had bumped into a stern man in black and thought her life was ending. Instead, it was beginning. She had learned that sometimes the coldest touch could thaw the frozen heart. That grief and joy could coexist. That being seen, truly seen, was the greatest gift one person could give another. And she had learned that love, when it came, didn't always announce itself with fanfare and flowers. Sometimes it arrived quietly, between dance steps and stolen glances, in the space where pretending became real and arrangements became forever. Gideon pulled her close and Rowan rested against him, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. Solid. Certain. Home. I love you, she said. I love you too. His lips brushed her hair. My impossible, magnificent disaster of a wife. Your grace is too kind. I am never kind. I am merely honest. He tilted her face up to his. And honestly, Rowan Hale, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. She kissed him then, there on the terrace beneath emerging stars, and felt the last piece of her frozen heart finally, completely thaw. The coldest duke in England had taught her how to be warm again, and the grieving widow had taught him how to feel. Together, they had found what neither could have discovered alone, that sometimes the most unexpected collisions lead to the most extraordinary destinations. That love can bloom even in winter's depths, and that being truly seen by another person is the greatest romance of all. Inside, the music played on. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new chances to grow. But tonight, under June's stars with spring finally giving way to summer, two souls who had wandered lost and alone found exactly where they belonged. In each other's arms, in each other's hearts. Home. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Your support helps us continue creating more stories of love, redemption, and second chances that matter. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another of our romantic stories. Click and discover more beautiful tales of courage and connection. With all our gratitude, Duke's Story.